Chapter 32, Section 4, Lyme disease and Borrelia. Lyme disease, okay, we've hearing more about this one more and more in the recent past couple of decades. Is a disease that infects humans, that we see what we consider to be Lyme disease, but the bacteria can infect numerous other animals. We get the name Lyme disease because it was initially recognized in Old Lyme, Connecticut. So, hence Lyme disease. This is the most prevalent arthropod, insect-borne disease here in the U.S. Okay. Primarily caused by, or actually only caused by, the bacteria known as Borrelia burgdorferi. It is a spirochete, so this was the one that looked like a stretched out corkscrew. What's interesting here is Borrelia is one of the very few bacteria that actually has a linear chromosome, not the circular that we've talked about in previous chapters. You see here is a scanning electron micrograph of Borrelia. Like I said, it looks like a stretched out corkscrew. And the way if you're in a medical situation, you're working in the medical field, the way you identify and you determine yes, no, whether or not your patient has Borrelia burgdorferi infection, so you want to do a diagnostic test which uses fluorescent antibodies. Hopefully you remember, or you know, that when your immune system, your B cells, makes antibodies, it's not making antibodies to a virus, it's not making antibodies to a bacteria, it's making an antibody to part of a protein on the surface of the bacteria or the virus. So if you have antibodies that you know will bind to a protein on the surface of a bacteria or a virus, you can tag those antibodies with a fluorescent marker so that under specific wavelengths of light, it glows. And that's what you see here. What they do as a means of diagnosing whether or not it's a Borrelia burgdorferi infection, they go to the side of the rash, they scrape it, they take that, smear it on a slide, and then they expose it to antibodies for certain proteins on the surface of Borrelia burgdorferi. They let it incubate, they rinse it away, and then they look at it under a microscope. What you see here is green and orange. Turns out the green is towards one protein on the surface of Borrelia. The orange is to a different protein on the surface of Borrelia. They each have a green or an orange marker. There's also red, there's blue, there's yellow. So you see the squiggles in this scraping from the bullseye rash that we associate with Borrelia. It's a deer tick. Once again, those little bloody suckers. Hopefully you remember in the last lecture I told you if you go out hiking, you like to go hiking, first thing you do when you get home is you look for new freckles, specifically freckles that look like they're moving. That's about the size of these things. They're very small until they've gone in for their blood meal. Students always ask, what is it about the mosquitoes, the ticks, the fleas, that when they're going in for a blood meal, they spread? Well, you got to remember, when they're going in for a blood meal, they jam their proboscis, or with ticks, they jam their head down in between the cells of your epidermis. They're looking for the underlying capillary beds. Once they get into it and the blood starts flowing out, your platelets start clotting up. So to keep that from happening, the insects that go in for blood meals, they will spit saliva into the wound. In that saliva are a bunch of proteins that are known act as anticoagulants. So that way the platelets and stuff don't clot up. The blood will continue to flow for a while. Well, in that saliva will also be the bacteria or virus or whatever they're happen to be carrying. So when they spit the saliva in, also goes that bacteria, that virus, whatever. Symptoms of Lyme disease: headache, backache, chills, and fatigue. And the thing is, for certain people, this headache, this backache, this chills, this fatigue will go on for months, if not years, well after the bacteria have come and gone. 75% of the cases, they're going to get a large rash. We'll have a picture of that in just a minute here. When you look at, here's the ticks, male, female. Here's the larva, here's the nymph, here's the larvae. These are the immature forms, these are the mature forms. Females are the ones that are primarily going in for the blood meal, so they're going to be the primary carriers, the ones spreading it. Look, right here is the head of a pin. This is a tick that is in the midst of feeding. So think that's the head of a pin. This is how small these guys are. So I wasn't joking when I said you look for a new freckle that you've never seen before and a freckle that seems to be moving, because they are very fast when they want to get moving. This bullseye appearance. At the center of this is where the bite occurred. You get the spread of the Borrelia, you get the inflammation. And then as it spread, you get this bigger and bigger, ever expanding circle, and that's the edge of the inflammatory response due to the bacteria being here. The bacteria, their waste products and whatnot are draining and diffusing faster through the tissues than the bacteria can. So this bullseye rash just continues to spread and spread and will get bigger, and it can take up like the whole area of an arm. So the way this picture's taken, it's a little hard to see scale. But yeah, it will take up quite a bit. It'll take up either like the whole arm here, or your whole thigh or whatever. During the initial stages, when it's just the beginning of the rash that's slowly getting bigger and bigger, the antibiotics will work. That will get rid of the bacteria, and yeah, they'll recover within a few weeks. Not a problem. But if it continues to go for a bit, even if you take the antibiotics and you clear out the Borrelia, some patients are going to get what they call a chronic issue. Something about the proteins on the surface of Borrelia triggers an over-response by your immune cells, so that the immune cells actually start attacking self. You start making antibodies to proteins in your joints. You start having your immune system attack the cells and whatnot in your joints. And I keep going joints because knuckles, knees, ankles, things like that seem to be some of the areas that seem to get hit the hardest earlier on. So you get arthritis, that almost looks like rheumatoid arthritis in some patients because of the immune response to the joints starts to alter the architecture. Others, this will progress and they'll actually start to develop neurological damage. The proteins cause an attack on self, which yes, it goes against the joints, but it also goes against nerves. Well, hey, guess what? You can have neurological damage throughout your body because your immune system's attacking the Schwann cells, or it's attacking the nerves directly themselves. You can there's a smaller percentage of the patients also have heart damage, attack of self, cardiac muscle. And again, it goes to the fact that it's not toxin. There's no virulence factor that is driving this. It is something about the proteins on the surface of Borrelia burgdorferi that overcharges, overamps up the immune cells, and they just start attacking itself. What we do know is that out there in the world, in the environment, deer and white-footed field mice are the prime mammalian reservoirs. It doesn't cause them major disease. It may cause a mild disease in them, because if it caused too much damage to them, the host would all be wiped out because predators would eat them, and then no reservoir, Borrelia dies out too. So it may cause a very mild, if any, type of symptoms in them, and then it gets spread due to tick bites. We've seen this Europe, Asia, but primarily we study it here in the US. Northeast, upper Midwest seems to be the places here in the United States where this is predominant. About 42,000 cases were reported in 2017. This is going up. This is on the upswing as more and more people get out. 95% of the cases are right here in blue. Connecticut up in there. And that's where, as I said, they first initially identified this. That's the Lyme disease. Doesn't mean that you can't get it anywhere else in the states, Midwest, Rocky Mountains. It just means that there's going to be other things there that outnumber organisms carrying Borrelia burgdorferi. Down around here, it's going to be Rocky Mountain spotted fever, hence the last lecture. Other areas, it's going to be other bacterial or viral diseases carried by arthropods.